This is Bolus Maximus. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Matt. Thanks for tuning in.
This is my first time hosting a podcast. How about you?
Yeah, for sure. Any idea how we're supposed to get people to listen and subscribe to this podcast?
Just by saying it?
Subscribe.
You're tuned in to Bolus Maximus with Brandon and Matt. Don't forget to comment, share, and smash that like button to stay up to date.
All right, welcome back. My name is Matt Taro. I'm here with my co-founder and co-host, Brandon A. Denson. And today on the Bolus Maximus podcast, we have a very special guest, Dr. Partha Kar, joining us from the UK. He is the National Specialty Advisor for Diabetes with the NHS in England, an OBE, and an all-around really great individual in the diabetes space, an advocate and champion of health and wellness. So, Dr. Kar, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure. Thanks for the invite.
Yeah, welcome. So what we like to do is we'll jump right into our conversation about, what it is that we decided to bring you on for. And because we've been dealing with COVID now for, a year, as you said, a little over a year, we felt your work in the space of vaccination and the champion for people to get vaccinated was something worth talking about. So could you just tell us a little bit about what you're currently doing in England, and how that, overall for diabetes, what's been playing out over there?
Yeah, so I think, obviously, 1 year has flown by, but not quite flown by either. It's one of those things, and suddenly you look back, it's 12 months that have just, so much things have happened. I think with my sort of national hats on, a couple of things that we've been looking into. The first primary one was actually looking and analyzing the data. And the important bit of the data was, what does COVID-19 do? And I think I say to everybody, it's a new thing. We have no experience in it. So we're learning as we're going along. And I think part of the work was learning about it, seeing what it did for people with type 1 and type 2 diabetes, and then using that data to make the argument as to when the vaccine protocols came along, who should be prioritized. Because obviously, yes, everybody wants it, but there's only so many you can start off with the vaccine supplies. So that was part of the big work. And I think there's a couple of other things we did because people are obviously stuck at home. So we tried to make sure people had access to lots of digital tools, whether it's with technology like Libre and CGM and all the Dexcom, etc., but also making sure that, had digital platforms that you can access at home for free. So that's what we made available to lots of people with type 1 diabetes. And we've just finished analyzing the data as well to see the impacts of people with type 1 diabetes. There's a bigger question to be answered, does COVID cause diabetes? But I think one of the things that we've done is looked at people who already have type 1 diabetes. And I think the good news has been that our diabetic ketoacidosis rate seems to have gone down. And that might be due to many, many factors. But we believe that part of the benefit has been having all these digital tools at home for people when they're stuck at home and really struggling with their mental health, everything else. So yeah, so that's pretty much a nutshell of the last 12 months, which is whizzed by.
Yeah, and it's only in, a brief segment there that you just explained it, but it's been a year worth of work for you. What have you seen? Who is the most at risk, or who needs the vaccine the most, based on your data?
Yeah, so I think if you take diabetes out for 1 second, I think the biggest risk marker has been age. There's no question about it. So which is why most countries quite rightly have focused on the age side of things, as they've gone along. There have been other bigger markers, deprivation has been a big thing. And I think it's not just for COVID, it's for everything. If you're coming from a poorer community, and traditionally it has been triangulated towards people who come from a mixed ethnicity or a Black ethnicity, and it's sort of skewed towards it. And that's not because of the COVID itself. I think it's because of access to care and the conditions in which they are living, etc. And then if you go into diabetes, I think our work has been more about looking into types, because that's a big question. Lots of data set have said, well, diabetes. And as I'm sure you all know, what tends to happen in the world when you talk about diabetes, people just go like, well, you're surely talking about type 2. That's it. And the conversation stops. And I've spent 4 years of my national role trying to explain to people, actually, they're two different diseases completely. It's one thing that they're tied together in one name. So a lot of the work has been focused on that, trying to do that. And that's what we did with COVID data. It was interesting showing the data that type 1 diabetes was not only at similar risks, in fact, in some cases, it was slightly higher risk. And that actually helped us bring everybody into the fold with their types of diabetes to say, please, no distinction, bring it in. Everybody comes in 1, 2, just let's do that. So that was an important part of the work.
So they were in the first wave in England. I don't know what it was like. I know we had, phases here in the United States. Was it phased out in the UK in a similar way? And was diabetes included in that first phase?
Very much so. So what we did, so the way we went, the first we went for the age, and we had a conversation. We said people at the highest risk, even with diabetes, was age above the age of 70. So that was the first go. And then because we've been quite good, just like the States, the pace at vaccination has been really quick. So we have now moved into everybody with diabetes. So everybody's getting it. So all diabetes patients now are eligible. And I think we're just finishing that group, the first shots, and then moving into the beyond that. So, which is great. So all ages have got it up till, licensing will allow 16 or 18, depending on your dose you're taking.
A lot of stuff, excuse me, a lot of stuff you brought up in regards to like the data. I think the data is important in every situation for everything, and, you said something that was very important as it relates to the older population having access to it because it affects them. And then now, I think I don't like using the word trial and error because this is a very serious issue that's been handled. But this is the first time that we've seen it, so we don't necessarily know, how to deal with it. But we know, like, elders, we know people living with diabetes or chronic illnesses, like they're more vulnerable, as of right now. So I think fighting how you fight for, I look at it not just the UK, I look at it around the world, like it's very important because if you're more vulnerable, you should have access to that first.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And outside of it, the interesting thing here in the States was diabetes type 1 was just entered into phase 1B or 1C as of last week, right?
Yeah.
I just got my shot last night, my first Moderna shot last night. So now they never asked for anything. I showed them my ID. They pushed me right through, gave me my shot, made me wait. And I was on my way. I was out of there in 30 minutes, not even. But I thought it was very interesting that you're quite literally finishing up that first phase of eligible diabetes patients. And the United States is just entered in type 1.
Yeah, I mean, we were asked to contribute a little bit to the CDC with our data and stuff, which we did. And I think the problem that we have, it's the narrative that sort of fuels it. Because when people talk about type 1 diabetes, traditionally it's been, well, type 1 diabetes, that's just kids have that, don't you?
Yeah.
And that's the narrative, which is the problem, because then you turn around and go like, well, those kids actually do grow up, right? And due to better care and, better insulins, better technology, people live, longer. It's as straightforward as that. So I've got patients who have had type 1 diabetes for 60 years, right? And they're doing all right. So for them, the age is still the biggest factor. So I think that's the problem, is that, people it's the belief that all diabetes is just about, you just need to have a healthier lifestyle, which isn't true for type 2 either. But, that's the narrative. And type 1, that's just kids have it. And it sort of skews the debate straight away. And that's the problem. So I think that narrative, and it's good in one way that people are starting to realize, you've got big international figures, right? Celebs who've got type 1. And you're going like, and that's one of the things we have tried to do in the UK is getting them to talk and go like, okay, I'm not a child. I'm somebody actually quite big in the world of celeb, and I've got type 1, I live with it, So I think those things are quite important for people to realize, is that, type 1 diabetes is no longer a kid's disease, and I'll give you one statistics for the UK, and I know that US is also collecting it. 46% of all our type 1 that we have in the whole of the country is above the age of 50. That's a huge number. That tells you its own story, how many people we have. Yeah, 46%. Yeah. So, people live longer. People do absolutely normal things in life with your type 1. So why wouldn't they live as long as anybody else?
So we definitely need to continue to change the narrative on this. And, this is something that me and Matt have talked about at Bolus Maximus. We look at it like these kids grow up. So at the end of the day, they start somewhere. The diabetes doesn't go anywhere. They still have it. So you got to think that pool of people is going to be way bigger than the pool of incoming people because they're already in the pool, So, yeah, I mean,
that's a crazy statistic.
I mean, the data doesn't lie behind that, but just the logical reasoning.
Listen, we always talk about, people who are in the public domain. Nick Jonas was a kid. He's not a kid anymore, right?
Yeah.
He's a grown-up, married man. That's your example. And Nick Jonas one day will be a older, elderly chap as well. And that's how it goes, Yeah. So that's your example, which I always say.
Yeah. So what would you say, what would be that's a big misconception. What would, thinking about the vaccine, in terms of the vaccine, what's the most common misconception about the vaccine? Have people looked at and thought, oh, it must be this, and just in terms of the vaccine in general?
Let me take a pause there, and let me just put the light on top of my head, because it looks like I'm talking from some.
I was gonna say, you look like you really in the bat cave.
In the bloody bat cave. Bear with me 1 sec. Let me just get back in this.
Right.
Yeah, no worries. Take your time.
I didn't think about the background being very dark.
Okay, let's try that. Oh, that's better. A little bit better. I can at least see myself a little bit more.
I mean,
Fine.
if you want to change the background, I think it's a cool background, but it is still dark. I didn't even think about
Yeah, I'm
that.
going to change it. I'm just going to make it normal. Hold on a second. Where's it gone? It's too many backgrounds. This is the problem when you're doing so many Zoom meetings. You keep on changing your backgrounds in light. Hold on, I'll just go none. That's fine. Let's go with that. Let's stick with that.
Whatever works for you.
Yeah, all work for me. It's fine. All right, let's do that.
Yeah. So,
right. Okay, I just stick to the how. Yeah, fine.
I mean, I got all my crap behind me. This is my life. We shoot right here. So, So what would you say? That's a big misconception, right, about type 1 diabetes and what we were just discussing here. So, what would be the most general misconception about the vaccine? Like, I think because it's so new.
I think there's many layers to it. I think the biggest thing people always ask. I mean, I think at this point, I'm going to say something which I've been trying to say to people here. If people wonder about a vaccine, right, we need to be careful that we don't suddenly go, that means you're an anti-vaxxer. Isn't. Majority of people are not anti-vaxxers. They're just worried, right? And you need to take your time. And I've done that. I tend to do that with all of my patients. We always ask, have you taken the vaccine? And if they say no, you go, tell me why. Now, there are some groups who will say, are you absolutely sure the data's there? Because this seems really quick, right? And they're right, because vaccines normally take a long time to develop. So people go like, how on earth have you come up with something so quickly? And the reason for that is everything else in the world has stopped, right? All the money's been pumped into it. All the economies are dependent on it. So they've just gone like, you know what, just stop everything. Just to cut out all the administrative bits. Let's just get on it and do it. That's why it's been so quick. And it's happened. Just shows when you stop everything else and you focus all your money and time into something, what happens? This is what happens.
Blows up.
Right?
Changes it. Yep.
So that's number one. From a scientific point of view, people then go, okay, are you absolutely sure it's safe? And the answer to that is, yes, it is, right? So those are the general questions that people ask. And then you have the weird and the wonderful coming out. Have they done anything on people with diabetes? Which I think is a good question. Yep. Because I think people should know, have they done it with people with diabetes? The answer to that is, yes, they have. If you look at the Pfizer data, the subset of data. And the other good thing, which I always now say to people, look at the data coming out from Israel and the UK. We've had so many people with diabetes now having had the vaccine on the ground, doing well. There's your answer. If you don't believe a trial, it's in the real world, right? And I would say all of my patients, super majority of them have had the vaccine. They're all okay. They have the usual bit of flu and a bit of flu, etc. But nobody's become unwell to the extent that you're needing a hospital admission or anything like that. And then the final sector of that is what I call the conspiracy theories, right? The genuine anti-vaxxers who have got to them somehow, where they've gone like, well, you're going to, this is a way of tracking you and, they're going to put some poison in your system. And I think you just need to take some time to explain that to them. And one part of that also is tied in with your ethnicity. You find a lot of that because people go like, yeah, but it's a medication they've created only for white people, isn't it? And what about us black people? Are you sure that? And people always laugh at. There is a reason for people asking that question. There is enough evidence in the past of people experimenting on black people, right?
Yeah.
So people are going like, well, how is this not the same? And that's a very good question. And I think you need to take your time and go like, no, it's not. This is properly done in a structured way. Yes, we appreciate this has happened in the past. So I think people make the mistake of dismissing people going like, you're just being paranoid, aren't you? And they're not. They've read enough and they've seen enough in the past to go like, convince me. So those are the sort of mixture of things that I tend to get. But I must say that the vast majority of people, when they raise questions, as I said, it's because they're genuinely worried. It's not because they believe a conspiracy theory. And that's important.
And I think from being black, being African American, it's definitely seen as not trustable. You know, this is things that I hear in the community and things like that. And like you said, you have I think what we're gonna come into, I think, which is gonna be a huge problem. You have the people that have the vaccine, and you have the people that don't, and then it's gonna create this chaos. And it's one of those things that we don't know why individuals, maybe they don't want to get it, maybe why they don't trust it, maybe it's something that had to do with previous family members before. Obviously, like you said, there's enough evidence out there for people to be like, whoa, we're good on that. You know, the Tuskegee syphilis, study like that. I mean, and there's plenty of more out there that have happened, but you know, when you look at that, it's kind of coming from like being black. It's like, how can we necessarily trust it? And I think it's just one of those things, like, you either trust it and you do it, or you just don't, you know. So
yeah, and you also need role models, don't you? You need people from the community coming out and saying, guys, you know, I've taken it, or I would advocate you to take it. You know, it makes a big difference. You know, when you got, let's just take the example of America. You've got somebody like, let's say, Oprah Winfrey and Barack Obama coming out and saying, guys, take it. There is a degree of faith and trust into individuals as well. Or you've got a big, you know, football star come out and say, I've taken it, so should you. Or, you know, LeBron coming out and saying it. They have big impact.
Correct.
You know, and
Correct.
we need to sort of use those as we go along.
I'm gonna put Brandon on the spot right now and ask him, are you thinking about getting the vaccine? Are you considering getting it? I mean, I got mine last night. I had been planning on doing it. I wanted to do it. I'm asking you, bro, are you going to do it?
To be honest, I haven't even thought too deep into it about getting it or not getting it. I don't really know. I don't know. As of right now, I don't know. Hey, I probably fall under multiple categories that you just listed, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the way I look at vaccines is this. I say to people two things, which is vaccine has got two roles here, right? Role one is to stop people from getting hospitalized and, you know, getting ill. That's role one. And lots of people go like, I'm young and fit. I was not going to get the problem anyway. So why am I taking it, right? It's a second part of the vaccine, which is more important actually for younger people, which is it stops the transmission. That's the key. And that's why I said to young people, that's why you need to have it. I'm not worried about you getting admitted. Absolutely not. And to be honest, even if you've got type 1 diabetes and you're young, your chances still are quite low because your age is in your favor. But what I want you to have is, if you take it, so if you look at the CDC guidelines, what are they saying now? They're saying that, well, if you had two shots, right, mask off and you can mix with people. So what we're saying is, listen, if you want to get a degree of normalcy for yourself, forget the planet for a minute, for yourself to go out and do stuff, that's why to take the vaccine. And then if you factor in the other things that are starting to come through, like, you know, you can see already airlines going like, hey guys, no vaccines, you're not getting on a plane. You can bet your bottom dollar that's going to extend now into, you know, you want to go to any big event, you want to go and watch a football match, you want to go and watch the baseball match. That's what's going to happen next, right? They're going to say, guys, I don't want somebody's. Now, there will be lots of issues around it because of privacy and freedom and all that sort of stuff, quite rightly. But you can see it's the nudge towards it. I say to people, forget all that. Forget all the debates about how can anybody possibly do to that. This is about, listen, man, if you want to go out and have a beer with your friends without a mask on in a normal environment like we used to, vaccine stops you transmitting. Your job, you take the vaccine to help to stop transmitting, not the prevention of hospitalization. So that's the way I tend to say to younger people.
And I don't want to get stuck on this because we could talk about this forever, but then it opens up that whole conversation. Well, I have the vax, I don't have to wear a mask. And now that comes into a whole explanation on the reasoning behind it is because you can't transmit it anymore. But people that you don't know and never seen, if you're on the street with, it's like, oh, well, he's not wearing a mask, blah, blah. You know what I mean? So it just opens up these so many different doors. But
it's something that I think, you know, lives will change for a long time to come on this one. And I think there'll be lots of people will find it very difficult to have those, you know, where do you just meet with your friends? Do you not go out ever without a mask? Where does this head to? But it's where it is at the moment.
We young people, I think we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years this shift. I mean, you talk about millennials and Gen X, Gen Z, whatever. You look at the younger generation and they kind of brush a lot of things off where it's like, I'm not bothered. I don't need to be bothered by this. You know, do you foresee or have you heard or seen data where like less young people are getting vaccinated because they feel like they don't need to be?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's natural. And I personally have no issues with people, you know, it's very easy for us to turn around. And it's a very common thing. You know, I'm in my late 40s, right? It's very easy for us to turn around and go like, well, in my day, right? you have heard that term many times over. I listen to that term from my peers and go like, I have no idea what you're talking about. In my day, when I was a teenager, I was as crazy as anybody else, right? As my teenagers expect them to be. So I have no issues with the present generation saying, I'm cool, I'm good, I want the vaccine. I think it's our job to try and convince them. If that doesn't happen, right, and we are seeing that in the UK as well, the people who are saying, "No, I'm good, I don't want it, I'm good, let's see how it goes," is the younger population, right?
Yeah.
So that's not uncommon. I think what will happen as the system will start changing, okay? So if you say to younger people, well, they're already saying that you can't fly outside the country without the 2 vaccines, you will see people go like, all right, what are you saying? I can't go and party in Spain? And you go like, not really. And they go like, just tell me where to sign up. I think the reasoning for people taking on the vaccine, younger generation, will be, you could call it selfish, but I would say they're looking after themselves. That's fine. So I think the narrative around them is not going to be take the vaccine because it will help the wider population. I don't think it will play that way. I think it should be, all right, what do you want to do in your life? Do you want to do that, you need to get the vaccine. And they'll go like, all right, then I'm off to have the vaccine. And that's fine. There's no problem with that at all.
Yeah. I mean, and I think we kind of already touched on this with, talking, Brandon mentioned in the African American community.
You can say Black, it's okay.
But what community is least likely to adopt the vaccination agenda?
I think if you look at history, I think you will find we've used the term vaccine hesitancy a lot. I don't think it's hesitancy. I think it's just because of what's happened in the past, right? I'll give you one simple example. This is from the UK. It's the same in the States. We know that. So if you are a Black mum or an African American heritage and you are giving birth to a child, you have less chance of getting painkillers compared to somebody who's white, right? Why do you think that is? Is it because the people who are giving are racist? No. The reason for that is because the people who are the doctors and nurses read somewhere that if you come from an African-American background, evidently you've got a higher tolerance of pain, which is complete nonsense. But that somehow is in their head, right? Now that's an example whereby if you then go back to that woman later on and go like, you know what, we want you to take the vaccine. They're going like, hey, listen, I remember what you guys were doing with me. Yeah. Try and convince me you genuinely care this time around for me to go and take the vaccine. I think that's an important point, right? And so I think this is years of issues whereby I think we need to be careful that we don't sort of suddenly the system doesn't turn around and say, oh, well, the country can't open up because that particular community is not really playing ball. I think, well, why the community needs to do its work to convince that community, not start blaming them again. So there will be, and we've seen that in this country where people coming from, South Asian background, India, Pakistan, they've had the degree of hesitancy in that community going like, not sure about it, try and convince me. So what we have done is we've used a lot of places of religious worship. So we've used, temples and churches and mosques and stuff and said, hey, come on, we'll do the vaccine in there, right? We'll get the religious leaders to front it. How's that? And you get a lot of elder generation going, all right, okay. So you got let's say the imam or the church leader coming out and saying that I will be there. I'll make sure the vaccination. So I think that's the faith, isn't it? A lot of generation will have a lot of faith in the pastor of the church and that sort of stuff. So I think you need different strategies to tackle that.
No, go ahead.
And when you said that, as far as the tolerance and being able to, withhold pain and stuff like that, what I think it's caused a lot of mental trauma, in everything, because it's like, we all know, coming from back in the day, like it was looked at that, we were like invincible without any type of treatment, so, I think that really hasn't changed in the medical field, whatsoever. And it's kind of like, okay, now you put the physical element and now you put the mental element, that'll drive anybody crazy and not trust or not believe in or not 100%. Want to accept anything that's brought forward.
Yeah. I mean, you're trying to get past years and decades of doing. If you talk to a lot of people, I've got a lot of people, friends who would turn around and say, yeah, that's not unexpected, is it? Now that feeling has settled in because of what they've faced over the years. You should come to a point where you actually feel to be part of the system. You go, why am I not being picked out just at the same rate as somebody else? But that takes years. And I think, the pandemic, what it's done is probably opened up, in the States yourself, you guys have gone through a most traumatic election. I think, such a divisive election, right, wrong, whatever, forget the debate. It's just been so divisive. And I've seen friends on both sides of the divide, very reasonable people and not quite aligning with my way of thinking. I'm going like, you're such a clever person. What are you talking? That makes no sense. And you go, but it's so passionate, isn't it? And I think what the pandemic has done, and you've had an election in the middle of that. I mean, that's just like amazing, right? And I think the place needs time to heal. And it takes a long time to heal these things. And in the middle of that, you've got a vaccination program and convincing everybody. It's not an easy game at all.
Yeah, it's tough. Yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, when you put it like that, I'm like, wow, that was our country.
It was.
we went through that?
A full election, and then through a pandemic, and it's just like it's already swayed because now one major thing is going on, but then we're talking about another major thing that affects lives just as much as what's going on in the political realm. Yeah,
and it affects. Like I was talking to my partner about this last night. My anxiety. She's been vaccinated for a little while. My anxiety was so high. I was so relieved yesterday after getting my first shot. I was like, holy crap. Like I did it. Right. Yeah. I made it to that point where like we're actually doing this. What aren't people thinking about in terms of communities with high comorbidity?
I think what you do see is that you're absolutely right, that the impact on mental health has been huge at this time, right? I think especially I see a lot of people with diabetes suffering from that at home, struggling, wondering. So what we have seen, the good news is that people with diabetes have taken up the vaccine quite well. So because we have made it very, very clear from our communications is that we are prioritizing you guys, right? Yeah. We're fighting for you. We'll make sure you're front of the queue and we'll make sure you get it. That's been a big plus because nobody's come out being able to say that, people with diabetes haven't been looked after. So that's part of the job, right? To make sure that we fight their case when we are. And I think that's been a big plus. And I go back again to people, you getting that view to people that, yes, you matter, and we're going to make sure you fit in and you make sure you get prioritized. And I think that's been quite big for us from that point of view. So we haven't had a massive pushback from the diabetes community about worries, etc. Yes, we have had the question, show us some data that has been done in people with diabetes. And I'm like, here you go. We've had the other side. We have had parents coming along, well, why can't my child have it? And I go, well, it's not licensed, can't help you there. And they go, but they should. And I go, I agree, but can't do it without the evidence. So, there's the other end of it. I can't give you something which is non-evidence-based either. I mean, that's the other risk. So there's that side of things.
What's is it 16? What's the
16? Yeah, 16 with Pfizer.
Yeah, and then are there any differences that you've seen? What do you mind if I ask? What vaccination you received? Was it Pfizer or Moderna?
Pfizer. Yeah, I took two of the Pfizer. Yeah.
Yeah. What about the new Johnson & Johnson?
Looks good. Looks good. I mean, I think the advantage is one dose. I mean, that's a big plus.
Yeah, and then being able to get it in a pharmacy.
Absolutely. I mean, you don't have to, Pfizer, obviously, Pfizer, Moderna, you have to store it and freeze and all that. Don't have any of that. J&J, I think the Johnson one looks quite positive, strong. And I think that may be the future in case, we get to a point whereby we have to do booster doses. I think it will be that, won't it? It will be, it will be a bit like you go and take your annual shot, like a flu vaccine or whatever, if you need be, etc. I think that's the way this will go, probably.
Is that the anticipation behind something like what we're looking at here in the next, maybe let's say 12 to 18 months?
Yeah, I suspect. I don't think it will be for everybody. I think it will be for people at high risk. But we shall see how it plays out because I think it will become like any other virus if we can get on top of it with enough control, where it's around in the community, but we protect the most at risk. Because at the end of the day, if you take a step back, there will, we can't stop death. Right? People will die as well as part of their normal existence. But what we're trying to do, and I think this is what a lot of commentators miss, what we're trying to do is just not let people die before their time. And this is what this does, correct? So it's not about trying to say you will never, ever die, because that's impossible, right? The planet will explode if that happens suddenly, right?
Yeah.
But what we're saying is that, look, if you got diabetes and let's say by nature of time and blah, 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 you would have died at 82, I don't want you to die at 74. That's all. That's what the vaccine's for. So I think, just like the flu does every year, kill people, so will this continue to kill people, but the numbers will be far less. And I think that's what we're trying to do. So, as you know, I mean, especially in the UK, the flu deaths due to flu have really gone down. That's because we are doing all these things, wearing masks and not traveling, but you can't have a normal life like that. So as soon as we start doing that, they will again go up. But that doesn't mean they don't die. People will die.
Correct.
Most people aren't touching their face, touching other things, like going out into public and coughing on everybody.
Yeah. And that's how people, but there will be a normal course of death as well. So I think that's important to recognize that, we're not trying to prevent death forever. That's not going to happen.
This is going to be a crazy question. You probably can't answer it. But do you ever think that there will be any sense of normalcy like it was before all of this happened?
Yeah, I think so. I think there will be. I think human beings are very incredible creatures, right? They find a way. And I think what people are looking for. So I think what has happened right now is every government is trying to battle the wave. I think once this is out of the government's hands, and they said to people, right, come on, people will find a way to be creative enough to lead their normal lives. I do think things will go back to a huge degree of normalcy, because if you look at the course of time, pandemics in the past, right? People, okay, it may take a bit of time, but human beings always go back to normalcy. And this won't be any different. I can tell you this won't be any different. It's, I can have this conversation with you. It's not like forever we're going to be wearing masks and never be able to sort of hug friends. No, I don't believe that at all. Right? I think we'll go back to, again, having a beer and watching a game and having our hamburger. It will happen. All right. It will just need to get the levels down to the level where it's allowed. I'm pretty sure. Nice.
Sounds amazing.
Speaking of time, does the time of year, I think because here in the States and I don't want to highlight the UK weather, but does the time of year make a big difference for patients and in terms of maybe exposure and vaccination? Like, is it better now because we're kind of leaving the cold winter months?
No, it's different because it depends as to what level of social distancing and all that stays into play. The warmer weather brings more people out, you see. Don't forget that. You go out to the beaches and you want to mingle more and you want to play games and stuff like that. So there's that other flip side of it. The warmer weather actually attracts more people together. So, and I don't think the vaccination from that, which is why I think it's such a rush to do the vaccination quite quickly before the warmer weather's hit, because I don't think they'll be able to hold the population back inwards anymore, right? I think we're already coming not very far off from that point where people are starting to come out, because there's a limit to what human beings can stay inside. And I think you're already starting to see that. And I think they will, and I think all governments know that they will lose control. So they're trying to move as quickly as they can to protect as many as they can so they can allow people to go out. And I don't think it's a question of allow. I think people will just go out. So they want to do it with a degree of safety. So that's what will happen.
A year from now, are we still doing vaccinations? And as we are now, are we still vaccinating people a year from now, do you think?
I think it depends a lot on whether we find this one vaccine does the job forever. That's going to be the key, right? Because if this vaccine, right now the antibodies are really high and they hold, then you don't need another vaccine, do you? Right? In which case, all you need to just vaccinate everybody you can find. Which is the whole population. The way at which you're going, you're probably going to get there by September, I think. It's done, right? In the States. That's what the prediction is, I think, as far as I remember.
Yeah, okay.
Well, if you don't need the second dose, you're done, right? Because then you're protected. Then I think people are going to go like, so what now? So then the only question becomes outside your country. So you can't travel anywhere till they are also done to the level of you are. Or you have to pick countries you go to where they've had their vaccinations.
Yeah.
That's just straightforward science.
And that's based on a percentage?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I think what will happen, I think in due course, all these data will be made public and people will just go and pick. They go like, right, you know what, I've had my vaccines. I need to go to a country where they've had their vaccines too. So, we don't bring anything back. That's it. So I can assure you not many people are going to be trekking to go to Brazil in a rush, right?
Right.
But I suspect a lot of people will be coming to the UK and vice versa, because there will be quite safe countries, I suspect, as you go along. And then there'll be other countries which are very, sea-based, if that makes sense, because of the whole open atmosphere. So, Maldives and Bali and all this, and Hawaii and all those sort of places will be quite popular. So the key will be that. I think if you need further vaccination because it's dipping down, then I think then you have the yearly cycle, and then we might have some problems because you still have to do it again. And all those people who are doing the vaccine now, don't forget they've got normal jobs to do as well.
Yeah.
They need to go back and do some proper healthcare as well. So.
Yeah,
for
true.
sure.
True. Yeah, I mean, I can't imagine having your normal job and then having this layered on top of it.
No, you can't keep on doing it. So I think that's going to be a key thing as to how they manage that bit going forwards. So yeah.
I don't want to call a country like Brazil out, but is a country similar to what they're experiencing and what they're going through, and what's going on over there? Is that going to cause a problem for the rest of the world?
It will. Yeah, it will. And I think you've got a variant because of that sort of thing. That's what viruses do. If you let it run, it will change. And the thing is, if it changes and your vaccine slips, you are back to square one.
Yeah.
So, and I think this is why it's frustrating to see some political leadership going with the whole, it's all good. Well, it's not all good, because not only are you putting your country into risk, you're putting all of the rest of us into risk. And that's the problem, is that, and you can see the change in what's happened. You've had a change in president.
Yeah.
And change in, you can see there is a definite change in the approach in the States, from where you were, where you are now. It's quite amazing, right? Look at the rates and everything that's done. So I think leadership has got a lot to speak for as to what they do, because at the end of the day, they're the who run the narrative for the country.
I think we all just need to get along, man. And then I just wish, can I wake up and that just be like one of my granted wishes?
Just basically get along, and everybody do one thing, everybody just go and vaccinate so we can all get back to normal. I think otherwise that's the risk of this. Certain countries going like, nah, we're good. We're just going to do our own thing. And you go like, yeah, but people are still going to travel to your country. What are we going to do then?
Yeah.
So yeah.
What is the biggest question in your head right now? Maybe you don't want to air it out, but what's on the table for you? What are you looking at right now as like, that's interesting? Or like, what's the biggest question that you're addressing right now?
I think, one of the things that the pandemic has done for me personally, or generally speaking, is that I think you see the benefit. And I probably said this to you guys earlier. I think for me, it sort of solidified the 3 pillars which I talk about for diabetes management, right? Self-management, peer support, access to trained professionals. Those are the 3 things on which everything stands. And the healthcare system does a lot to do the number 3, which is access to a trained professional, right? They do get more doctors, more nurses, more trained, but they don't spend much time on the self-management and peer support. As a result of which, diabetes care is always variable. You want to improve things, you get the community to talk to each other, right? And self-management. And you need to do self-management in a way which is a bit more modern, not like, here's a book,
good luck,
go home and read it, right? Best of luck with it. No, you need to get some like digital stuff. You need to get people where they can talk to each other and go like, I've tried this, what do you reckon? And I think for me, that's been the biggest thing as to take it forward. So technology is a part of that, right? Access to technology and, things like, I've always said, all this resistance we have towards, things like Libra and XCOM and stuff, and people are battling, that should become part of your diabetes care, man, right? It's like the fundamental change in the 70s when people had to check their diabetes, they had to dip their urine, and then we had glucose strips. Well, we now move to an era whereby you don't have to prick your finger. We should just get it available. That's what we should do. And I say this to all companies as well, you need to play their part to doing it, right? If you keep on jacking up the prices, so what we have been able to do in the UK quite successfully, we have been squeezing the companies down on their pricing. So all the prices have come down because we have gone like, come on, guys, you want the market, we'll give you the market, we'll bring the price down.
Can we hire you in the US, man? We need you. We need you.
I think it can be done in the US. I was talking to a few stakeholders there, and I was like, well, the thing is, you guys don't play savvily enough with the companies. Yeah. The companies, you let the companies run you.
Yeah.
Should we do it that way? It should be the other way around.
Welcome to America.
That is the key.
So, I'll give you one example. We sort of said, anybody who's type 1 diabetes and is pregnant should have a continuous glucose monitor, right? And no names, but one company said, well, that's our price. And I went like, well, that's not my price. So think again. So guess what? They've all changed their pricing because we went like, hey, guys, it doesn't matter what you think. It really matters what I think. So I think you've got to negotiate. But the thing is, at the end, I don't get what I want. But that's the negotiation. You find a middle way, which works for everybody.
So
I think that's what needs to happen.
It's all a negotiation, and at the end of the day, like what I look at, you're fighting for the people. So at the end of the day, it can be stakeholders and it can be companies, but at the end of the day, if we don't come on the same field, then there's going to be millions and millions of people that are affected immediately, and there's going to be millions and millions of people that come after that are going to be affected. And I think like a CGM, that's a no-brainer. Like you said, we went from dipping urine sticks to testing on the glucometer to not having to test anything at all. When you leave the hospital, that should be the first tool that you ever receive, because that is going to start the baseline on how you make adjustments from the very beginning of being diagnosed.
A very good example of that. Let's say you're watching, let's say, a game, right, or basketball, and you love LeBron James. I tell you, blood glucose strips is like having like little pictures of LeBron James playing. You have no idea how he plays, right? Yep. That's just like you take 4 pictures of LeBron James in a game and he goes, look, okay, this is a really tall dude with a basketball. I don't know what he does.
Yep.
But unless you have a video of him actually doing a dunk, you have no idea.
Yep.
Now, that's the difference between a CGM and a blood glucose monitoring, isn't it?
Yeah.
In a blood glucose strips, you just have 4 spot checks in a day and you go like, oh yeah, I've got numbers. I have no idea how they connect to each other. While you look at it through the day, you got a video.
Yeah,
you know what to do.
Yep,
that's the way to look at it. I always say.
I love that analogy.
Cheers. Yeah, man, that's the best. That's probably the best, Dr. Kar. That's the best analogy I've ever heard for using a CGM versus pricking your finger. And I think as somebody who's been using it and whose doctor in Los Angeles said that exact, he says, you don't have a CGM right now? I was like, no, I'm flying blind. He's like, oh my God, everybody should have one of company so XYZ.
I mean, I'll finish that by saying, I'll say 2 things on that. My experience is with companies, right? They're not evil people. They generally are also trying to help people. But what I say to them is that, okay, if you're trying to reach out to people, what good is it if you've just reached out to a few people? You've not done anything. And I think the second thing is to policymakers, I always say, I always have this one question when I sit in a room and I always go like, if you had diabetes, right, say, or your daughter has had diabetes, do you want them to prick their fingers or do you want them not to?
Mm-hmm.
And I hadn't met a single person who go like, I really would like my daughter to start pricking her fingers when she's 3 years old. And you go like, no, you don't. You're lying. That's crazy, right? So if you've got the facility to make that happen for somebody else in your job, that's a fantastic position to be in. Make it happen.
Yeah.
And I think that's the way I sort of would look at it.
I want to just ask you this before we let you go here. Who is somebody in the United States that people should be looking at that does work similar to yourself? Do you have a counterpart here in the States that you work with regularly?
Not that I'm wholly aware of. I think the US is very segmented. I think that's what I find. And I think you do have champions, but they're very academic champions. That's what I find. You have fantastic individuals who are like, you look at the papers and the publications. And I've got a way of looking at it, which I say this to academics as well. I say, at the end of the day, your paper that you published, if you haven't been able to put it into policy, all it's done is improved your CV.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Right? You haven't changed any lives.
Yeah.
Okay, good for you. You got another sort of tick and you've got another publication. It looks great when you go to a gala dinner and it makes you big and fantastic. Haven't changed a life. So, and one example for that I'll give you there, we got this fantastic professors here, Eleanor Scott and Helen Murphy. So they did some amazing research which showed that if you put a CGM on a mother who got type 1, your baby survived more compared to if you didn't. I mean, that's as clear as you may. It came to us and we were like, you know what? We need to do this. We need to change these lives because we are genuinely going to save kids, right? And make a mum with type 1 diabetes happy. There's nothing worse than a mum losing her baby, right? And that's what we've done. And I think that's what I always say to them is that your legacy as a professor is not the research you've done, but the lives you've changed. And that's the issue, which I always say with the States, which I've picked up, is that you don't necessarily have somebody in a policy role who would go like, bring me all the research, let me see what I can make happen. As a result, you've got fractured. So what we've done in the UK over the last 4 or 5 years, it's taken us time to get here, where we've gone like, so I tend to go like, I'm not an academic. Don't send me your fantastic papers. Tell me, distill it down and tell me, will this help somebody on the ground? And I'll try my best to make it happen. And I think that's what systems need. The academics need to join up with policy. Then you have improvement of lives, because policymakers on their own can't do it either because they're flying blind without the knowledge. And I think that's what I say, is that what probably I haven't picked that up in the States. Fantastic academic profile, not necessarily the policy side of things to make it happen.
I think we all have a huge role to play, whether it's an advocate, whether it's a professor, whether it's somebody collecting research and data. We all have a role to play, and I think once we figure that out, and like you said, we begin to work together with our synergies to make things not just come to light, because from papers and research projects we see those, but at the end of the day, you have to have people that can execute on those things that people are bringing to the forefront. We all have our strengths and we all have our weaknesses at the end of the day, but we got to bring everything together so it will have a direct impact, a positive impact, a more sustainable impact on our community as a whole.
So true. So true. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
Yeah. Well, we just heard about a lot of strengths that you bring to the table, Dr. Kar, and we appreciate your time today to speak on the vaccine and diabetes in general. So our goal was met today. We appreciate you and what you've done for the diabetes, people living with diabetes, very important. I know your language matter document. People living with diabetes in the UK, in the United States, they're going to learn a lot from this correspondence here, and we appreciate it. So we look forward to having another conversation with you and having you maybe join a call one day. But that peer support is something that we've been working on Sundays afternoon at 3 o'clock Pacific Standard, at 11 o'clock in the UK, 11 p.m. We're on Bolus Maximus. We'll talk. We'll kind of shoot the breeze and have a conversation. So thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to connecting again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Take care.
Take care.
If you don't know, now you know. Bolus Maximus is not sponsored by anybody, but if you would like to get involved or sponsor a podcast,
please reach out to us at thebolusmaximus@gmail.com. That is the THEBOLUSMAXIMUS@gmail, or through our website, bolus, BOLUSM.org. That is www.bolusm.org. We also have an Instagram, Facebook, and a YouTube channel. Please feel free to reach out.